Today I am going to show you how you can replace your battery terminals with something nice and shiny and new like this, because your old battery terminals have become aluminum foil. Alright, so the first thing you're going to want to do is remove your terminals, and for me I had to use one of these wrenches because this is so old that this is just totally stripped and I couldn't get a socket on it. So just make sure you remove your negative so your battery isn't live anymore. Alright, so in this video I'm going to be showing you the style of terminal where your cable comes in and it is actually screwed down on top of another post, but there's a different style where it's like a clamp and you shove the wires into it and then it clamps it down. But this is a Ford Econoline van, and that's the style that it has, so I'm going to show you how to remove that. So first off, this one is very old and corroded, as you can see, and actually I don't even have to loosen this because this whole thing pretty much should just slide right out. It's all very loose. I haven't even touched this yet. So in my attempt of trying to remove the bolt here, this terminal is actually so corroded that it has completely detached from here. You can see this metal over here is really thin. So all you have to do here is, it looks like I'm going to have to take two separate wrenches and unscrew the bolt, because even though this whole thing is very loose, there's another bolt on the back side that's holding that in. Alright, so for what I did for mine is I just took the leftover bit of terminal and I just snapped it off, because the way that this has to go on is that the hole in here has to go into this, and since I didn't get the proper equipment, obviously I don't have a new one of these. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to clean all this up so it makes a good connection, and I'm just going to thread what's left of the old terminal onto the new one. So I ran into a bit of a problem with mine because of this wiring back here. I couldn't get this tool on there. So what I did was I took a wire brush first and I started to use the wire brush. But then I realized there was a bunch of oil everywhere. I think that a few years ago someone probably sprayed some sort of anti-corrosive spray on it, but it left a bunch of oil residue. So I just took a rag and I took a plastic bristle brush and some soapy water and just sprayed everything down and scrubbed it a lot. And then I also, to the best that I could, try to clean this off. And the next thing that I'm going to do is I'm just going to take the top off of this, and hopefully it's all the same size, and it should just go right over. And it doesn't. Okay, change of plans. After another trip to the auto parts store, I picked up a different style of terminals. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to cut these, and then I'm just going to shove them in through there and hope that everything works. Alright, so here's what I did. I chopped this one off, I chopped this one off, I still have the old bit somewhere. Here's some of the shielding from the skinny one, still have some of the shielding there. And here's the rest of it right here. I just cut this whole nonsense off. And I stripped the wires back, and I just kind of twisted them together, and I just put them in under here, and then I tightened this down really tight. And now this is like new. It looks a little rough, but this will make a really good contact patch. Alright, so for the positive, what I had to do was I had to take some garden clippers right here, and I just snipped it off because I was not able to get my wire cutters over it because there was just too much cable here. And I'm also not able to strip these, so what I've been using to strip them is, where'd it go? So what I've been using to strip them is I've been using this X-Acto knife, and this actually works pretty well, and you can just cut right through and you can strip these wires pretty easily using one of these. Alright, now that I have installed the positive terminal, I'm gonna do something to prevent corrosion furthering this. I'm just gonna plop these little felt things on, just like so, and hopefully that will cut down on the corrosion a bit. Alright, now that I have the terminals all together, I'm just gonna tighten them down. This particular one is a 13mm socket, and you're just gonna tighten it down. Also helps to push the terminal down too so it doesn't come back up while you're tightening it. Now that one's nice and sturdy. Now we're gonna do the positive. Now for my positive, I'm not able to get a socket in here, so all I'm doing is just using a 13mm wrench and just tightening it up that way. So the reason why I couldn't use these ones was because the posts that I thought I could reuse here, these little holes here, I thought that I could just go over it, and this one barely fits, but it doesn't go over the bigger threads. And I could have drilled this out, but honestly, this is really weak and really thin, and it's pretty gross looking, so it's honestly better that I just went with this, and now I have fresh copper making contact with it on both sides. This one I have a little too much here, but that should be fine. And this is honestly a lot cleaner of a setup, and it's easier if we want to change it again someday. So that's why I wasn't able to use these ones. If you want to do this and you don't want to go the way I did and you only have to replace just your positive, you can buy a negative and your positive will fit over the negative side with a little bit of force, but it does go over there. So if all you need to do is just replace the positive for yours, you can just buy a negative and that should work. You can, it's the same thing, it'll fit over it, so you can always do that. But if you do that, this is a little bit smaller than this is on the battery, so you might have to bend that out a little bit if you want to go that route. For the tools that I used for this job, I first used an 11mm socket to do the top bolts on the terminals, and then I use a 13mm to get onto these sides. And then to clean up the area, because that's pretty important so that you have the best contact possible, I bought this tool at AutoZone. This is for the top of your battery posts, and this is to kind of clean everywhere else. And this is pretty useful, it's pretty aggressive, but for my application, I also had to use a wire brush as well as a plastic brush because there was a lot of oil around mine for some reason. I also recommend using some gloves because it's sharp and you also have some electrical current and you don't want to get directly shocked. And I also used a couple of pliers here. I used some wire strippers as well as an X-Acto knife to cut the thicker battery cables because this doesn't really work well for that. It doesn't open big enough. If you have one that does, that's good for you. You're ahead of the game. And I also used a 13mm wrench to get to the positive battery terminal because I could not get a 13mm socket on it. And as an option, I also used some soapy water in this detail container and a rag just to clean up the area. You don't have to, but I just wanted mine to look a little cleaner.